Hello and welcome to our final webinar about VTA's draft transit service plan. Today we're going to focus, in addition to an overview of the countywide plan, on the Milpitas and Fremont area in particular. We're going to look at the Milpitas BART station and service around Milpitas and some of the routes that travel from Fremont currently into different parts of Santa Clara County. We appreciate you joining us. This is the fifth of a series of webinars that we've done focused on the service plan. Your host today, introduce ourselves. My name is Cody Kratz. I'm the Administrator of Digital Communications. Also with me is Adam Berger, Senior Transportation Planner, managing the Redesign, and Kermit Cuff in our Operations Department, Transit Service Development Supervisor, who will be helping to answer any specific questions you have. There are a few different ways that you can ask those questions or provide any feedback or comments you have today. The first would be if you're watching this on YouTube, you can use the chat feature. If you're on desktop, you'll see it off to the right. If you're on a smartphone, the best way to use that feature is to use the YouTube app, and you'll see the live chat link down at the bottom. You can also ask us questions on Twitter or on the Facebook event. We will check there towards the end to see if there are any questions we should answer. If you have any technical issues, you can email social@VTA.org. And if you have any questions, if you're watching the recording of this or later on, if you think of something that you'd like to ask, or if you have any feedback to provide, you can call our customer service line. That's 408-321-2300. Or you can email community.outreach@VTA.org. That email is on the screen there. And as I said, this is one in a series of webinars that we're doing, which we hope are a helpful way to provide you with information, a convenient option for you if you aren't able to attend one of our meetings in person. We will show a link at the end to a survey where we'd really appreciate your feedback and understanding better how we could improve these in the future to help you out even more. So the other way you can learn about the proposed draft plan is at nextnetwork.vta.org. This is a website that has a lot of information about why we're doing this, the big picture, some of the background of the community engagement we did to get to this point, and then specific route-by-route information. So if you want to look up the route you ride, you will be able to find out what's proposed to change about it, if anything. For example, on the screen you see what we show about Route 60, and also show any new routes that are proposed or major changes. So be sure to check that out. Either open it up while we're during the webinar here or look at it after the fact. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Adam, who's going to talk a bit about the big picture and Milpitas and Fremont in particular.
All right, thank you, Cody. This is a from-scratch redesign of our entire transit system that VTA operates, bus and light rail services in Santa Clara County. We have about 70 routes in our system, and almost all of them are going to be touched in some way by this redesign in terms of the routing of those routes, the frequency, the days of the week they operate, or the hours of the day in which they operate. Folks can download a complete system map at the nextnetwork.vta.org website, and encourage folks to do that to see everything. We're going to be focusing in the second part of this presentation specifically on Milpitas and Fremont and North San Jose. So we have three main goals with this project. The first of them is to increase transit ridership on our system. As you can see, over the past 15 years or so, the population in Santa Clara County has steadily risen. We're up about 12%. And while you would think that would mean more people riding VTA transit, we've actually seen the opposite occur. We're down 23% over that time, recovering a little bit after a big hit after the dot-com crash in the early 2000s. One reason why we're not back where we used to be is that the quantity of service that VTA is able to provide has gone down. The cost of living in Santa Clara County has affected our cost of labor, but we haven't increased spending on public transit over this time. So higher costs, no new money means lower quantity of service overall. So that's part of the picture. The other part is just a sense that what VTA is offering isn't as compelling as it used to be, maybe not as useful. So what can we do in this redesign to design a more useful and appealing system? Another one of our goals is to improve our fare box recovery rate. This is a measure of cost effectiveness. The fare box rate is the portion of a transit agency's operating costs that are covered by fares collected from riders. The more fares that we are able to collect, the more we can reinvest back in transit service and provide a greater quantity of service overall. As you can see, compared to our peers on the western half of the United States, VTA has been at the bottom. We are in decline on our fare box rate since about 2011. We've fallen off from around 14% to present day where we're close to 10%. Correcting that trend would be a good thing for the continued viability of VTA transit service. Another big change is that BART will be coming to Milpitas and Berryessa later this year. We anticipate service beginning in December of 2017, and we're projecting 23,000 trips that's coming and going combined, heading through those two gateways into our system. To give you a sense, that many trips is about 1/6 of all boardings in our transit system today. So it'll be a major change with how people get into Santa Clara County, out of Santa Clara County, and the travel patterns on our own system. We know that we'll need to redesign our system to some extent just to accommodate that new volume of trips. So here's how we got here. In the summer of 2016, before we proposed any transit changes, we did a 5-month outreach period where we asked the public how we can make public transit better. And in that outreach, we talked about different goals that transit services are asked to achieve and how we might want to balance those goals. And what we heard was that the public would like a greater emphasis on the transit ridership goal of designing transit service and less on providing geographical access. So the plan we're putting together, our 85-15 plan, focuses more on ridership. And we'll talk about that in more detail in a moment. We released this draft plan on January 5th at our Board of Directors meeting, and we are currently in a public outreach phase that ends on February 20th, where we're asking folks how we can make the plan better. We know that you know your neighborhood to a greater degree of detail than we do, and we're counting on you to help us make the plan better. The last time VTA did a redesign of this magnitude was in 2008. And we made about 50 changes between the release of the draft plan and the release of the final plan, just based on good ideas that came from public comments. So we're really hoping you can help us with this plan. Once we develop a final plan, we'll take it to VTA's advisory and standing committees in March, and then to our board of directors in April for their adoption. At that point, our service planning team will get to work turning it into an actionable plan, which would roll out around the same time that BART service begins, currently scheduled for December 2017. So I mentioned the goals of public transit. There's this fundamental question, which is, what is the purpose of public transit? And it's a difficult question to answer because public transit agencies are asked to achieve two goals that are in direct competition. The first of those goals is the ridership goal. And this is taking a business-oriented mindset toward designing public transit service, trying to maximize the number of people that you carry, and in doing so, minimize the subsidy that you pay per passenger carried. These services tend to have few routes, but those routes tend to be very frequent, and those routes tend to be concentrated in areas that have urban design characteristics like density and walkability that are really supportive of public transit. The other goal is the coverage goal. This says that we should strive to put transit routes to as many places as possible in order to maximize the number of people who could potentially use public transit. Networks that are designed with this philosophy tend to have many routes, but few routes that are frequent, as it covers a larger portion of the service area. So we look at these two objectives, these two goals, as how much spending should we contribute toward the ridership goal and how much spending should we contribute toward the coverage goal. The balance of VTA's current system is 70% ridership and 30% coverage. Now, given the direction from our board of directors and our general manager to increase the ridership on our system, that means we would increase ridership spending and decrease coverage spending. And that's going to be a big impact on people who depend on coverage routes. So we asked folks how they would choose, if they were the board of directors, to divide up spending toward these two goals. And in the summer of 2016, we showed three different scenarios: a network that was a 70-30 balance, just like today's, a network that was an 80-20, and a network that was a 90-10. And we asked you, seeing how you trade access for frequency, where you would like to see us design our next draft service plan. And you told us 85-15. We took that input to our board of directors in November at their board workshop, and they seconded it and told us to design a draft transit service plan that employs an 85-15 balance. That means more frequency, more ridership, but less coverage. So we said, if we move in that direction, it means you're going to have to walk farther to get to more frequent transit. You'll have to walk farther to get to faster transit. And in a network like this, you'll be making transfers more often, but that would mean that you'll probably get to your destination quicker if you're on that frequent network. We heard that the public, by and large, was willing to accept all of these changes in the design of the network. So here is a map of our frequent service as exists today. These are routes that are 15 minutes or better in frequency and operate all day. What you'll see here is that most of the service is concentrated in downtown San Jose and East San Jose. If you are on the western half of the county, along El Camino Real or Stevens Creek, you don't really have good ways to connect north-south. There's not much of a grid network going on here that would facilitate frequent transfers. So here's what we're proposing. Expanding this network considerably and building it into more of a grid model. This way, people who are not necessarily on those corridors that exist today could be on corridors in the future that provide them with fast, frequent transit. And where they need to make transfers, those transfers would be predictable and typically short, which means they wouldn't have to add that much extra time into their commute in order to make this trip. This is part of our strategy of expanding our market and making transit more useful. We're also proposing to expand the number of rapid services in our system. This is a map of our current rapid service, the 522. We just have one. We are proposing to increase our rapid services by adding 2 more. The 523, which would be an upgrade on the limited 323 that currently operates on Stevens Creek in San Carlos, except we would propose extending this on the western end, heading north up to Lockheed Martin Transit Center in North Sunnyvale, along the Matilda and De Anza corridors, and then extending it on the eastern side through downtown over to the Berryessa BART station via Santa Clara Street, Alum Rock, and King. Another route that we're proposing is the 500, Rapid 500. It would be an upgrade on the Dash shuttle that exists today. And instead of going from Diridon around downtown and back to Diridon, it would continue all the way to the Berryessa BART station and operate at 15 minutes or better all day, connecting those 2 big regional hubs of Caltrain and BART. Speaking of BART, we are proposing to increase the number of buses that serve the Milpitas station area, 42 buses and trains per hour, even more in the peak period at Milpitas At Berryessa, it would be 28 buses and trains per hour, including those 2 frequent rapid services into downtown San Jose, connecting you with the rest of our transit system. We're proposing some changes to our light rail network as well. The biggest is a new line along the top of the system connecting downtown Mountain View with the Milpitas BART station and then to the Alum Rock Transit Center. Since we would be adding a new line, we would be taking back the green line that currently goes all the way to downtown Mountain View and turning it back at Old Ironsides, but increasing the frequency on that route to 15 minutes. In fact, all routes would operate at 15 minutes every weekday. We're also proposing for the yellow route there, that's our peak period commuter express. Instead of operating it as we do today with 3 trips northbound from Santa Teresa up to the Bay Point station and then 3 trips southbound, we're proposing to turn that around at St. James Station just past downtown and make 6 trips in each peak period so that we maximize the number of trips that occur in that skip-stop section along the Highway 87 corridor. So what you get for all of these changes is that the number of people who have access to 15-minute or better all-day service increases dramatically. 160,000 residents would gain access to the frequent network, and 150,000 jobs would now be on the frequent network. We know from other agencies that have done similar transit service redesigns that this type of strategy helps increase ridership as it makes your service more useful for more people than it is today. But since we are doing all of this in a budget neutral context, we're not adding any additional funds. This means we have to take service away from some places in order to make it better in other places. About 1% of our current ridership, about 1,300 people, would no longer have access to any transit service within half a mile in this redesign. But based on the reallocation of those resources, an additional 13,000 people would gain access to frequent transit among our current users. That's the trade-off we're dealing with. We are mindful that that would be a big impact for many people, and we are currently seeking public feedback on what that impact would be and how we might be able to make adjustments in the final plan to address that impact. We're also proposing to increase transit service levels on the weekends. We know that folks who look to public transit as a travel option tend to have jobs that are in the retail and restaurant sector, and those jobs are often 7-day-a-week jobs, particularly busy on weekends. So in the places where those land uses exist, we are proposing to increase transit service so that we can be a 7-day-a-week option for more people. So let's focus specifically on the Milpitas, Fremont, North San Jose area. We've got a number of changes to talk about here. The biggest, of course, is that BART service will be coming to Milpitas. The BART station is located very close to the Great Mall station, where a lot of our transit services operate today. We're proposing to have many of those services make the Milpitas BART station their hub rather than the Great Mall station. Some routes, like the 66 and the light rail routes, would still serve the Great Mall station area, but by and large, you would see a shift over to the Milpitas BART station. That includes some frequent routes that we aren't really touching as part of this redesign, like the 104. But the Milpitas BART station would be the new big hub in that part of town. Another change is the orange light rail line. We mentioned that in passing earlier. The orange line and the blue line would operate each at 15-minute frequencies staggered, so an effective 7.5-minute frequency in the Milpitas North San Jose corridor heading over toward Old Ironsides. That'll be a big increase in the quantity of transit service in the area. Another change is Route 20. This is a new route partially replacing Route 321. It would go from the Milpitas BART station westward along the Agnew, Scott, Arquez corridor on its way over to downtown Sunnyvale and then downtown Mountain View. This would be the best connection from travelers heading to or heading from Alameda County to get over to some of the job-rich areas in North San Jose, Santa Clara, Sunnyvale, and Mountain View. This route would operate at a 30-minute frequency in the midday and a 15-minute frequency in the peak period. It would be an upgrade on the peak-only routes that currently operate in that area. Route 60 is a route that currently goes from downtown Campbell up to the Santa Clara Caltrain station and then up north to the Old Ironsides area. We're proposing to reroute that to head a bit eastward from the Santa Clara Caltrain station, going through the airport, absorbing the Route 10 airport service that we currently operate, and then continuing along Brokaw and Lundy up to the Milpitas BART station in order to create a strong Milpitas to San Jose Airport to Caltrain to downtown Campbell connection. This route would be upgraded in frequency to 60 minutes all day. I'm sorry, to 15 minutes all day, Route 60. And boardings that occur at the San Jose Airport would be free, just like the Route 10 today. Route 77 is a route that currently terminates at the Great Mall Transit Center. Instead, this would be shifted over to the Milpitas BART station, and the frequency would be increased to a 15-minute all-day route on weekdays. Route 70, which currently connects the Milpitas station area, really the Great Mall Transit Center, with the areas in southern and eastern San Jose. This route would go east from the Milpitas BART station and then south, connecting again with BART at Berryessa. Since that service would be redundant with the new BART service, we are proposing to decrease the frequency on it from 15 minutes presently to 30 minutes in the proposed plan. It would keep its same routing. Route 47, we are proposing to make a small adjustment in the routing. Instead of heading north up along Able and then over to McCarthy Park, we are proposing to have it continue along Tasman and then connect with McCarthy or Alder, I believe, and then head up just to provide some additional coverage in this route, but it would no longer go along Able there. We are proposing to bring Route 66 from the Great Mall station over to the Milpitas BART station and upgrading the frequency on a portion of this route. For the segment that is south of the Milpitas BART station, this would be a 15-minute route all-day frequency. For the segment north, there would be a decrease in frequency. So while in the peak period it would be 15 minutes, the midday would change from 20 minutes as it is currently to 30 minutes in the proposed plan. Route 46 is a route that we currently operate doing a loop in Milpitas. We are proposing to discontinue this route as part of the redesign. We know that a lot of the students in North Milpitas at the high school use it to get home. So we're proposing to create a new route called Route 246 that would travel along Escuela, Jacqueline, Park Victoria, Calaveras, and Temple. That would continue making those school trips, but it would only operate around the school bell times. It would not be an all-day service like Route 46 is today. Lastly, I want to talk about the routes that currently travel into Alameda County to serve the Fremont BART station. Those are routes 120, 140, 180, and 181. We are proposing to discontinue all of those routes as part of this redesign because now that BART comes to Santa Clara County, we can't justify operating service that is funded through locally collected sales tax outside of our county, particularly when we're hearing from our residents and elected officials that there is so much need for more transit service in our county. So we would not operate any services into Fremont as proposed by this plan. Fremont or AC Transit would operate a route down to the Milpitas BART station, that's Route 217, but no VTA routes would go north of the county line. I want to touch on some related efforts that our listeners should know about. Measure B is a sales tax measure passed by Santa Clara County voters in November of 2016. We're projecting $500 million to come in over 30 years to be used for transit-specific uses. There are 4 particular uses. The second one bulleted there, enhanced frequent core bus network, would represent an increase in the amount of funding going to our transit service that could potentially be used to increase frequencies on some routes or restore some routes that have been proposed to be discontinued. Our board of directors has yet to decide how they want to allocate that funding, almost $17 million a year among these 4 bullets. So once they do that, we will know how much money we have to be able to spend on additional transit service. We just don't know yet. We are updating our paratransit service policy. The areas that are eligible for paratransit service are defined by the shape of the transit network. Where fixed routes operate, VTA is required to provide service, and we currently do up to 1 3/4 of a mile from a fixed route service. If some areas are deleted, it would mean that some people who currently live in those areas or travel to those areas and rely on paratransit would be without their paratransit service in the future. Our general manager and our board of directors have made strong statements about minimizing the impact to paratransit users in Santa Clara County. So we're looking at how we might be able to update our policy to make sure that folks who currently have access do not lose access, or if perhaps restoring service to some areas where the draft plan proposes to discontinue them could ensure that those folks keep their access. We're also doing a project called Core Connectivity, which looks at how VTA can provide some sort of service to areas that lose transit service in the draft transit service plan. Are there possibilities of partnering with cities to operate local city shuttle programs, or might we be able to find some way to subsidize rides made on on-demand services like taxis, Ubers, or Lyfts that would help provide some amount of access to folks who may live in a place where that access would be discontinued in this plan? We'll be working on developing that program in the coming months, taking it through VTA's committees in the middle of the year, and hopefully having something to implement around the time that this service program the service change goes into effect in December 2017. Lastly, we are also conducting a fare study right now. One of the things that's been pointed out to us is that it doesn't make sense to have a transit network that encourages transfers while having a fare policy that requires cash paying customers to pay every time they board a vehicle. So we're going to see how we might be able to get free transfers added to our system. Since we don't want to sink our fare box rate any further, we'll be looking at doing that in a revenue neutral context, which might require an increase in the base fare. So we're evaluating that right now. We're also looking at how we might be able to lower our youth fares and youth pass prices. They're currently higher than some of our neighboring transit agencies, and perhaps restructuring EcoPass to make it more in line with the fare policy goals that were set for it, to take in the same amount of revenue as we get through other fare media. It's currently coming in lower. We'll be looking to continue or expand our low-income passes through our TAP program. And since we would no longer have a community bus fare, the discount community bus fare would go away in this redesign. If you have feelings about the fare policy that VTA has, I encourage you to go to nextnetwork.vta.org, find the fare policy page, and take the survey, letting them know how you feel about these issues that will help them develop policies that our board will look at in the coming months. Just a reminder that February 20th is our comment deadline. At that point, our staff will start designing the final transit service plan, which will quickly go to our March committees and the April Board of Directors for approval, with the big changes coming in December 2017, coinciding with the start of BART service to Santa Clara County. There's our project website again. You can see specifics on all of the routes to a much greater detail than I've been able to discuss today, along with a lot of background information on how we got to this point in our project and why VTA is undertaking this redesign. With that, I will pass this back over to Cody, and we'll see if we can answer some of your questions.
Thank you, Adam. And thank you everyone who has tuned in, and for those who are asking questions and leaving comments in the chat. Again, a reminder, if now that you've heard the presentation, you have questions or you want to provide some feedback on what Adam described, the best way to do that is in the YouTube chat. I see a handful of people already doing that. What I'll do is answer as many questions as possible, or rather I won't, but I'll pass them off to Kermit and Adam to answer. And if you have more of just some feedback that you'd like to share, you can also put that there. We will be copying all of the input we hear and documenting that and passing that off to the planning team to consider as they refine the draft plan. So one question, actually a couple of questions came up. Thank you, Susan, about the BART station, and the one was about the transit center moving to the new BART station from Great Mall, which I think Adam described, but I just want to have Kermit or Adam elaborate on that. And the other is parking charges at the stations. We may need to get back to you on that if you needed precise information, but my understanding is it won't be free.
Yeah, I don't believe they've set parking rates yet for the BART station. I do know that they are considering doing dynamic pricing. So as the parking spaces fill up, the price might change, and that you'll be able to access our website or an app in order to see what the current price is before you decide to drive over to the BART station. For the question about the Great Mall services being relocated to the Milpitas BART station, I'll let Kermit talk about that.
Sure, thanks, Adam. The essentially, yes, the Great Mall Transit Center is being sort of effectively moved over to Milpitas BART. They've built a very large, like 20 bus bay transit center at the Milpitas BART station. That'll be our main transfer center. So both light rail and the BART would be at the same station, plus all the buses. And it's where the current Montague light rail station is going to be. We'll be renaming that the Milpitas BART station, so it all has the same name. And the AC Transit 217 would be rerouted to come into there as well, as stay straight on Milpitas Boulevard down to that location. And we would also, as Adam mentioned, we would also move the Express 104 to that location too, and so that people could park there and take it or transfer off of BART. There, for those that are concerned about getting to Great Mall after this is all done, there'll still be two light rail lines. So effectively, every 7.5 minutes on the weekdays, there'll be light rail going between the Montague or the Milpitas BART station and Great Mall. Plus, we'll have lines 47 and 66 going by there as well from the Milpitas BART station.
I'm not seeing a whole lot of other questions, but Susan asked a follow-up question about other park and ride lots. And just for those who aren't seeing the chat, there are no current plans to charge for parking at light rail park and ride lots if you're using those today. The BART stations are somewhat of a different scenario. There's one comment here, more of feedback about the 47 and Route 70 and 71. I think Kermit may want to speak to that a little bit.
That's a very valid comment about the possibility of having the 70 and 71 extend up into Milpitas as opposed to having the 47. I think the biggest challenge to that is connecting to having those, like if you're coming up White Road, is connecting to light rail and connecting to BART, whereas if we were to continue to go up, say, toward Milpitas High School, that is how that would, you wouldn't be able to have that connection, or you'd have to go all the way into the Milpitas BART station and come all the way back out again. So the proposal, what's different with the 47 is it's currently sort of goes like an L route. It goes up to Calaveras and then over to McCarthy Ranch and goes back the same way. And this would become a two-way loop so that people could get across Milpitas a lot easier. And if you're at McCarthy Ranch, you can get at it from both sides. So whereas right now you have to come all, from the light rail, it's kind of a long trip over and around. This way you could get it from both directions. So it's something that we'll look at your suggestion on the 77 one, but again, the challenge is trying to connect it to BART and light rail at the same time.
Okay, and so a few other folks had chimed in and tuned in, but I'm not seeing further questions. So just to respect everyone's time, if there are any burning questions or comments, type them in there real quick here. Again, thanks for the comments about the 66, the 70, 71. You can also contact us if you're watching the recording or if you think of something later. The screen is showing some of the different ways you can contact us. Community.outreach@vta.org is a really good way to send in any thoughtful or detailed comments you have. You can also call our customer service line, 408-321-2300. If you're watching the recording or if you are tuned in live, either way, we'd really appreciate your feedback. There's a link on the screen, and we're going to put this in the description of the video as well, to a survey where we ask you a few questions about this webinar and how to do future webinars. We do hope it was helpful to you. And with that, we thank you for your time and hope you have a great day.